Three Messerschmitt 109s drop from the sun like stones. Captain Leland Voss sees them at 18,000 feet. Silver flashes against winter clouds over occupied France. His P-51 Mustang shudders as he pushes the throttle forward, then stops. The radio erupts with warnings from the bomber formation behind him. Enemy fighters closing, 3,000 feet per second. Cannon armed, no way out. Voss does something that violates every survival instinct a pilot possesses. He pulls the throttle back. The Mustang lurches. The engine note drops from a scream to a growl. Airspeed bleeds off. 190 knots, 170, 150. The altimeter unwinds as he noses down into a shallow dive that feels more like falling than flying. The lead Messerschmitt commits. Its pilot sees an easy kill, a damaged American limping home, and opens fire at 800 yards. Tracer rounds arc past Voss's canopy, bright orange lines stitching the gray December sky. He keeps the throttle back. His airspeed continues dropping. The enemy pilot adjusts his aim, closing fast, too fast. At 400 yards, the Messerschmitt screams past, overshooting by 50 feet. Its slipstream rocks Voss's fighter. The German pilot pulls up hard, confused, trying to reposition. Before he can recover, the second Messerschmitt dives. Voss throttles back again. Same maneuver, same impossible physics. The fighter overshoots, unable to slow its energy state quickly enough to track a target that refuses to run. The third enemy pilot hesitates. He has just watched two aces blow their attacks on what should have been a stationary target. He commits anyway, angling for a beam attack from the side. Voss drops 10 degrees of flap. The Mustang's nose pitches up slightly. Airspeed drops to 130 knots, dangerously close to stall speed. The Messerschmitt flashes past, its pilot firing blindly, hitting nothing. 3 attacks, 3 overshoots, 0 hits. Voss advances the throttle, pulls out of the dive, and rejoins the bomber formation. His hands are shaking. His flight suit is soaked with sweat despite the freezing cockpit. The radio crackles. A bombardier's voice, shaky with adrenaline, asks what the hell just happened. Voss does not answer. He does not have the breath. But in his head, the numbers align. The physics worked. The math held. The maneuver that got him laughed out of 3 briefing rooms and earned him the nickname, "The break just saved his life." And the day is far from over. Behind him, the bomber formation steadies. Ahead, German airspace stretches for another 100 miles. The mission is less than half complete. Fuel gauges show enough for the return flight with 10 minutes to spare. Engine temperature is normal. Control surfaces respond smoothly. The Mustang is undamaged. Voss checks his 6 o'clock position through the rearview mirror mounted on the canopy rail. Empty sky. The 3 Messerschmitts have broken off, either low on fuel or too confused to re-engage, but more will come. They always do. December 17, 1944, northern France. The winter of 1944 carved deep into the bones of every airman stationed in England. Ice formed on the glass. Breath fogged the oxygen masks. Below, the patchwork quilt of Britain's countryside disappeared beneath December fog. And above, the contrails of 1,000 bombers scratched white lines into the gray ceiling of war. This was the height of the combined bomber offensive. The 8th Air Force had committed itself to daylight precision bombing, a doctrine rooted in American confidence and the hope that the Norden bomb site could hit a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet. In theory, waves of B-17 flying fortresses would sweep across occupied Europe, destroy German war infrastructure, and return home under the protective umbrella of their own mass firepower. In practice, it was slaughter. German fighters tore into the bomber streams with methodical violence. Messerschmitt 109s and Focke-Wulf 190 Doris climbed high, positioned themselves nose-on, and hurtled toward the formations at closing speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour. The head-on attack became the signature tactic of the Luftwaffe day fighter squadrons. It was brutal, efficient, and psychologically devastating. The bombers had no forward-firing guns. Their nose turrets carried twin 50-caliber machine guns, but the gunners had only seconds to track, lead, and fire before the enemy flashed past or through the formation. Most B-17s went down without ever landing a meaningful hit on their attackers. The gunners knew it, the pilots knew it, and the Germans knew it. By December, loss rates on some missions exceeded 20%. Entire squadrons evaporated over the Ruhr Valley or the rail yards at Schweinfurt. Crews flew their tours in a state of fatalistic endurance, counting missions like prison days, knowing the odds were stacked against survival. Into this environment came thousands of young men who had never seen combat. Farm boys from Iowa, mechanics from Detroit, college dropouts, and factory workers who had volunteered or been drafted into a war that demanded they climb into aluminum tubes and fly into storms of steel. They learned formation discipline, oxygen management, and how to aim a gun through frozen gloves. But no one taught them how to survive the head-on pass. There was no manual for that, just acceptance and luck. The 8th Air Force tried tactics, tighter formations, staggered altitudes, fighter escorts when range allowed, but in late 1944, the P-51 Mustangs could barely reach deep into Germany before fuel constraints forced them to turn back. The bombers flew alone over the heart of the Reich, and the Luftwaffe waited. The sound of it all was deafening and unreal. The roar of Wright Cyclone engines at cruise power, the rattle of gun turrets swiveling on ball, bearings, the crackle of radio chatter as pilots called out enemy positions, then the scream of diving fighters, the hammering staccato of 20mm cannon fire punching through aluminum skin, the wet thud of rounds hitting flesh, and sometimes the terrible silence when an engine stopped or a wing folded and a bomber began its long fall toward the earth. Leland Voss was born in 1920 in a town called Millbrook, Indiana, population 473. His father ran a hardware store. His mother taught piano. The house smelled of machine oil and sheet music. Dinner conversation revolved around repair work, mechanical problems, and the precise measurements required to make things fit. Lee learned early that the world operated on tolerances, that nothing worked unless the numbers aligned. He attended Millbrook High School. Not popular, not bullied, simply invisible. He joined the science club and spent lunch periods in the workshop building model airplanes from balsa wood and tissue paper. He tested them in the schoolyard, timing their flights with a stopwatch, adjusting wing angles by fractions of degrees. Teachers described him as meticulous. Classmates described him as odd. He entered Purdue University in 1938, studied aeronautical engineering, spent weekends at the library instead of football games. He graduated in 1942 with decent grades and no clear direction. The world was tilting toward war. Voss enlisted, passed flight training, not at the top of his class, not at the bottom. Instructors noted his technical aptitude but questioned his aggression. One evaluation called him hesitant under simulated combat stress. Another flagged him for overanalysis. He was assigned to fighter duty, then shuffled again. Some pilots wore their reassignments like scars. Voss treated each one like a research opportunity. He studied how different squadrons operated. He noted what worked and what got people killed. He kept a notebook. His squadron mates noticed something strange. Voss never panicked. Even when an engine misfired over the channel, even when flak tore a hole in the fuselage the size of a dinner plate, he would narrate the problem aloud clinically, like a surgeon calling out instruments. Oil pressure dropping, altitude loss at 200 feet per minute, trim compensating. It unnerved some men, it reassured others. There was no hysteria in his voice, just data. Voss also noticed things, small things, like how German fighters always attacked from the same angles, like how anti-aircraft fire followed predictable patterns based on altitude and speed, like how enemy pilots hesitated when a target behaved unpredictably. He began testing small variations, flying slightly slower on approach, altering attack runs by 30 seconds, changing altitude in increments that broke the gunner's rhythm. Nothing dramatic, nothing that violated orders, just marginal adjustments. And he started coming home. The statistics were subtle but real. Voss's missions had a lower casualty rate, fewer hits, cleaner exits. Other pilots dismissed it as luck. Voss dismissed it as probability. He did not boast. He kept refining. By mid-1944, Voss had flown more than 40 missions. He was still a captain, still overlooked, still the odd one, but his instincts were sharpening. He was beginning to understand something fundamental about aerial combat, something that doctrine missed, something that would soon be tested in the most violent way possible. The briefing room at Bodney Airfield smelled of cigarette smoke and stale coffee. 23 pilots sat on folding chairs arranged in uneven rows. Captain Leland Voss sat in the back, notebook open, pencil ready. Major Roland Pritchard stood at the front beside a map of occupied Europe. Red lines traced the route. Blue circles marked flak concentrations. Yellow stars indicated known Luftwaffe airfields. The target was an industrial complex outside Stuttgart. Maximum range mission, minimal fighter escort, expected enemy resistance, rated as heavy. Pritchard spoke in clipped sentences, outlining altitudes, formations, rendezvous points. The pilots listened with the practiced detachment of men who had heard it all before. Some took notes, most did not. When Pritchard finished, he opened the floor for questions. Voss raised his hand. What is the expected closing speed of enemy fighters during head-on attacks at assigned altitude? Pritchard frowned. Standard doctrine applies. Maintain formation integrity. Do not break away to engage individually. Voss persisted. If we reduce throttle during the attack run, we alter their energy calculations. They overshoot. We survive. The room went quiet. Lieutenant Dalton Kincaid, callsign Duke, turned in his seat. He had 11 confirmed kills and a reputation for aggressive flying. He looked at Voss like he was looking at something broken. You want us to slow down when they are shooting at us? Voss kept his voice even. Airspeed management creates positional advantage. If we throttle back at the correct moment, their closure rate exceeds their ability to adjust fire. They miss. Kincaid laughed. It was not a friendly sound. That is the dumbest thing I have ever heard. You throttle back, you stall. You stall, you die. Several pilots nodded. Voss tried again. I have calculated the margins. At specific speeds, the P-51 maintains control authority while reducing predictability. It disrupts their attack geometry. Kincaid stood up. You know what we call that, Voss? We call that being scared. You are not tactical. You are just slow. The nickname stuck. By evening, the entire squadron was calling him the Brake. Some used it with affection. Most did not. Major Pritchard pulled Voss aside after the briefing. He spoke quietly, almost gently. I respect your thinking, Captain, but fighter combat is not a classroom exercise. Doctrine exists because it keeps people alive. Do not freelance. Do not experiment. Fly the mission as briefed. Voss nodded. He did not argue. He knew argument was useless. He returned to his quarters and opened his notebook. He reviewed his calculations. The math was sound. The physics held. Throttling back during a high-speed attack created a predictable overshoot if executed correctly. The risk was stalling. The reward was survival. He closed the notebook. Tomorrow's mission would be his 23rd. He had survived 22 by trusting numbers over instinct. He was not going to stop now, even if it meant flying alone in a room full of pilots. The idea came to Voss on a night in late November. He could not sleep. The barracks were cold. Men snored in metal cots arranged in rows. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered in their sleep. Voss lay on his back staring at the ceiling, thinking about energy states. He had been reading translated Luftwaffe tactical manuals acquired through intelligence channels. The German approach to air combat was elegant. They thought in terms of energy management. Altitude equals potential energy. Speed equals kinetic energy. The pilot who controls energy controls the fight. German doctrine emphasized the boom and zoom. Climb high, dive fast. Convert altitude into speed, fire, extend away, climb again. It was efficient. It was deadly. And it relied on one assumption: the target would try to run. Every Allied pilot was trained to evade by accelerating. Speed equals survival. If a Messerschmitt dives on you, you firewall the throttle, go to full power, and try to outrun the attack. The problem was simple. You could not outrun a diving fighter. Physics did not allow it. A fighter attacking from above had gravity and momentum on its side. It would always close the distance. The only variable was time. And time was measured in seconds. Voss sat up. He pulled his notebook from under his pillow and walked to the latrine where a single bulb burned through the night. He sat on the floor and began sketching diagrams. He drew vectors. He calculated closure rates. He worked through the math. If an enemy fighter dives from 20,000 feet at 450 miles per hour and you are flying level at 200 miles per hour, the closure rate is 650 miles per hour. That gives the attacker roughly 6 seconds from visual acquisition to firing range. In 6 seconds, most pilots react, panic, and accelerate into a predictable flight path. The attacker tracks that path. The attacker fires. The target dies. But what if you did the opposite? What if you decelerated? The attacker's fire control solution assumes constant or increasing target speed. If the target suddenly slows, the attacker's aim point shifts forward. He fires where you were going to be, not where you are. He overshoots. You survive. The risk was catastrophic. Slowing down in combat felt suicidal. It violated instinct. Predators chase. Prey runs. Slowing down turns you into bait. But Voss was not interested in instinct. He was interested in math. He calculated the stall speed of a P-51 Mustang at various configurations. Clean, no flaps, 115 miles per hour. 10 degrees of flap, 105 miles per hour. The margin was thin, but real. If he throttled back and dropped partial flaps, he could slow to 130 miles per hour and maintain control. That was 70 miles per hour slower than cruise speed. 70 miles per hour of unpredictability. Enough to disrupt an attacker's solution. Enough to survive. He closed the notebook. He walked back to his cot. He did not sleep. He lay awake calculating how to test the theory without getting himself killed. He would need the right opportunity, the right mission, and the willingness to ignore every pilot who would call him a coward for trying. December 17, 1944. The mission briefing began at 0500 hours. The target was a synthetic oil plant at Magdeburg, deep in central Germany. The route would take them over heavily defended airspace, flak corridors, fighter bases, the worst kind of mission. High risk, maximum exposure, minimal margin for error. Captain Leland Voss dressed in silence, heated flight suit, leather jacket, gloves, Mae West life preserver, parachute harness. He checked his oxygen mask, his sidearm, his escape kit. He carried no lucky charms, no photographs, nothing sentimental, just his notebook tucked inside his jacket pocket. The walk to the flight line was cold and dark. Engines were already turning over. Ground crews swarmed the aircraft, performing final checks. Sergeant Vernon Kubiak met Voss at his assigned Mustang. The crew chief was a stocky man from Cleveland with grease permanently embedded under his fingernails. He had maintained Voss's aircraft for 6 months. He trusted the captain more than most. "Throttle response is smooth," Kubiak said. "I adjusted the mixture like you asked, richer at low RPM. It will give you more control if you need to decelerate quickly." Voss nodded. "Thank you, Vernon." Kubiak hesitated. "You really going to try that slowdown thing?" Voss looked at him. "If the situation requires it." Kubiak shook his head. "You are either the smartest pilot I have ever met, or the craziest." Voss climbed into the cockpit. He strapped in, ran through the pre-flight checklist, and started the Packard Merlin engine. The sound was a rolling thunder that drowned out thought. One by one, the fighters taxied to the runway. Voss was flying in the second element, wingman position. His element leader was Lieutenant Kincaid. Duke had barely spoken to him in 2 weeks. The takeoff was smooth. The Mustang lifted cleanly, gear retracting with a thunk. Voss formed up on Kincaid's wing and settled into cruise climb. They crossed the channel at 15,000 feet. The French coast appeared as a gray line beneath scattered clouds. Flak bursts dotted the sky over Calais, black puffs of smoke marking the predictable firing patterns Voss had studied. The formation threaded through, unscathed. Over Belgium the sky cleared. Visibility stretched for miles. Voss scanned constantly, left, right, above, behind, looking for the glint of sunlight on metal, looking for the contrails, looking for the first sign of enemy fighters. They appeared at 07:15 hours, 12 Messerschmitts, maybe more, high and ahead. They were positioning for the attack. Voss felt his heartbeat accelerate. His hands tightened on the stick. The radio crackled. Bandits, 11 o'clock high. Kincaid's voice was calm. Brake on my command. Prepare to engage. The Messerschmitts rolled inverted and dove. Voss watched them fall. He calculated their speed, their angle, their time to intercept. And he made a decision. He was going to throttle back. He was going to test the theory. He was going to survive or prove himself a fool. There was no middle ground. The Messerschmitts came in pairs. Textbook Luftwaffe tactics, one high, one low. Crossfire geometry, no escape angle. The lead fighter dove on Kincaid. Duke broke hard left, firewall throttle, standard evasion. The German tracked him easily. Cannon fire stitched the air. Kincaid rolled inverted and dove. The second Messerschmitt committed to Voss. It came nose on, closing at over 600 miles per hour. Voss saw the muzzle flashes before he heard the radio warning. Bright pinpoints of light along the wings. 20-millimeter cannon, each shell the size of a thumb. Explosive rounds that could tear a fighter apart. Instinct screamed at him to run, to push the throttle forward, to gain speed, to evade. He did the opposite. He pulled the throttle back. The Merlin engine's roar dropped. The Mustang shuddered. Airspeed began bleeding off. 200 knots, 180, 160. The Messerschmitt grew larger in his windscreen. The German pilot adjusted his aim, leading the target, anticipating forward motion, firing where Voss should have been. The rounds passed 10 feet ahead of the Mustang's nose, then 20 feet. The German was overshooting. His closure rate was too high. His fire solution collapsed. At 300 yards, the Messerschmitt screamed past Voss's left wing. So close, Voss could see the pilot's helmet, the swastika markings, the scorched gun ports. The slipstream hit like a fist. The Mustang rocked. Turbulence buffeted the control surfaces. Voss fought to keep the wings level. His airspeed had dropped to 140 knots, dangerously slow. He advanced the throttle smoothly. Power returned. The Mustang accelerated. He pulled back into formation, hands shaking, breathing hard. The radio erupted. Kincaid's voice, sharp and confused. "Voss, what the hell are you doing?" Voss keyed his mic, evading. 2 more Messerschmitts dove from the right. They came in staggered, attacking the bomber formation. Voss was between them and the B-17s. The first fighter ignored him, focusing on a bomber. The second committed. Voss throttled back again, same maneuver, same physics. The Messerschmitt dove through his altitude, firing, missing, overshooting by 40 feet. The pilot pulled up hard, trying to loop back for another pass. He did not have the energy. He stalled halfway through the loop and fell away, recovering 1,000 feet below. Voss rejoined the formation. His fuel gauge showed normal consumption. Engine temperature was steady. The Mustang was undamaged. 2 attacks, 2 overshoots, 0 hits. The theory was working. Kincaid's voice came again, angrier now. "Voss, maintain speed. You are going to get yourself killed." Voss did not respond. He was watching the sky. More Messerschmitts were forming up for another attack. The bomber stream stretched ahead for miles. The mission was barely 20 minutes into German airspace. The fighting had just begun. Voss checked his ammunition counters. Full load. He had not fired a shot. He was not here to hunt. He was here to survive and to prove that physics could beat instinct, that calculation could outlast aggression, that the brake could become the bait and live to tell about it. The Messerschmitts dove again. The third attack came from below, a climbing shot, harder to execute, higher risk for the attacker. The Messerschmitt pilot was aggressive. He pulled vertical, bleeding speed to gain angle. Voss saw him coming. He chopped throttle and extended speed brakes. The Mustang pitched nose up. Airspeed dropped to 120 knots. The Messerschmitt fired climbing, cannon shells arcing upward, passing beneath Voss's tail. The German did not have enough energy to sustain the climb. He stalled, rolled off, and dove away. 3 attacks, 3 overshoots. The fourth and fifth attacks came together. 2 Messerschmitts in a bracket formation, high and low, coordinated, professional. Voss throttled back and deployed 10 degrees of flap. The Mustang wallowed. Both Germans overshot. The high fighter by 30 feet, the low fighter by 50. Their cannon fire crossed empty air where Voss should have been. The radio chatter intensified. Other pilots were noticing. A bomber gunner called out Voss's position. Mustang at hour 6, flying defensive. He is throttling back. They keep missing him. Kincaid's voice cut through. That is insane. He is going to stall and spin. Another voice, calmer. It is working though. Look at him. He is untouched. The sixth attack came from the beam, a deflection shot, the hardest to execute. The German pilot was skilled. He led perfectly, firing a long burst. Voss throttled back and dropped 15 degrees of flap. The Mustang's nose pitched up sharply. The cannon rounds passed ahead. The Messerschmitt flashed by, overshooting again. Voss advanced throttle, retracted flaps, and climbed back into position. His altimeter read 17,000 feet. They had lost 1,000 feet of altitude during the engagement. The bomber formation pressed on. 7 attacks. 8. 9. Each time Voss throttled back. Each time the enemy overshot. The pattern was undeniable. The German pilots were reacting to what they expected. A target that ran. A target that maintained speed. A target that followed doctrine. Voss gave them none of that. He gave them unpredictability. He gave them mathematics. The 10th attack came from directly astern, a tail chase, classic position. The Messerschmitt had every advantage. Voss throttled back and deployed full flaps. The Mustang's speed dropped to 110 knots. The edge of a stall. The controls went mushy. The stick felt loose. The Messerschmitt closed to 200 yards and opened fire. Voss kicked rudder, skidding the Mustang sideways. The German's rounds passed to the right. He overshot, unable to slow quickly enough. Voss retracted flaps and accelerated. 11 attacks. The 12th came as the bomber formation approached the initial point. The target was minutes away. The Messerschmitts were making a final desperate push. 3 fighters dove together. Voss throttled back one last time. His hands were steady now, his breathing controlled. He knew the timing, he knew the physics. All 3 Messerschmitts overshot. Their cannon fire tore the sky apart, but touched nothing. Voss pulled back into formation as the bombers began their attack run. His Mustang was undamaged. His fuel was sufficient. He had survived 12 separate attacks, 12 overshoots, 0 hits. The mocked maneuver had worked every single time. The landing at Bodny Airfield occurred at 1300 hours. Voss touched down smoothly, rolled to his revetment, and shut down the engine. Silence settled over the cockpit. He sat for a moment, hands still gripping the stick, feeling the absence of motion. Sergeant Kubiak was already running toward the aircraft. He reached the wing as Voss opened the canopy. The crew chief's face was pale. He stared at the Mustang's fuselage, the wings, the tail. He walked a slow circle around the fighter, inspecting every panel. "Captain," he said quietly, "there is not a scratch on this aircraft, not one bullet hole." Voss climbed out. His legs felt unsteady. He had been in the cockpit for over 7 hours. "How many did you count?" Kubiak asked. 12, Voss said. "Maybe 13. I lost count near the end." Kubiak shook his head slowly. "I heard the chatter on the tower frequency. They said you were throttling back, slowing down while they were shooting at you." "That true?" Voss nodded. Kubiak looked at the Mustang again, then back at Voss. "You are either blessed or insane, maybe both." Other pilots were landing. Mustangs taxied in one by one. Some showed damage, bullet holes in wings, shattered canopies. One came in trailing smoke from a damaged engine. Ground crews swarmed each aircraft, counting holes, assessing damage. Voss walked toward the debriefing hut. His flight suit was soaked with sweat despite the cold. His hands had stopped shaking, but his heart still pounded. Inside the hut, intelligence officers sat at tables with maps and notebooks. Pilots filled out combat reports, marking positions, estimating kills, describing engagements. Major Pritchard stood near the back, arms crossed, watching. Lieutenant Kincaid was already seated. He looked up as Voss entered. "We need to talk about what you did up there," Kincaid said. His voice was tight. Voss sat down. "I followed my training." Kincaid leaned forward. "You did not follow anything. You throttled back during attacks. You slowed down. You violated every doctrine we have." Another pilot spoke up. "It worked, though. I saw it. They could not touch him." Kincaid turned. "That does not make it right. It makes it lucky. Next time he stalls and dies." Voss stayed quiet. He had no interest in arguing. The door opened. Colonel Merritt Aldridge entered, followed by 2 other intelligence officers. Aldridge was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the careful posture of someone who spent his life reading reports. He carried a folder. "Captain Voss," Aldridge said, "I need your account of today's mission." Voss described the engagement, the 12 attacks, the throttle reductions, the overshoots. He spoke in factual terms without embellishment. Aldridge took notes. When Voss finished, Aldridge looked up. "We have corroborating testimony from 3 bomber crews, specifically from Lieutenant Ellsworth Drummond, a bombardier in the lead B-17. He watched your defensive maneuvers from his position. He counted 12 separate enemy fighter attacks, all resulted in overshoots. He credits your actions with preventing attacks on his formation." Kincaid interrupted. "Colonel, with respect, what he did was reckless." Aldridge turned to him. "What he did was effective. Reckless would be getting shot down." Voss survived. The bombers survived. That is the mission. Pritchard stepped forward. "Colonel, permission to speak? Are we considering this tactic for broader implementation?" Aldridge closed his folder. "That decision is above my level, but I will be writing a full report. Washington will want to know about this." He looked at Voss. "You just changed how we think about fighter defense, Captain. Whether that is good or bad remains to be seen." The report reached 8th Air Force Headquarters within 48 hours. Analysts studied Voss's combat account, cross-referenced bomber crew testimony, and reviewed gun camera footage from other fighters in the formation. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. It showed a lone Mustang decelerating during attacks, enemy fighters overshooting repeatedly, and the Mustang rejoining formation unscathed. Within a week, tactical officers began running simulations. Test pilots flew controlled engagements, replicating Voss's throttle-back maneuver under observation. The results were mixed. When executed correctly, the maneuver worked. The attacking fighter overshot, losing its firing solution. But timing was everything. Throttle back too early and the attacker adjusted. Too late and the rounds hit before the speed differential took effect. The margin was narrow, a matter of seconds, of instinct married to calculation. By January 1945, the maneuver was being taught as an emergency defensive option, not doctrine, not standard procedure, but an available tool. Instructors emphasized the risks: loss of airspeed, vulnerability to secondary attacks, the possibility of stalling under fire. But they also emphasized the results. Voss had survived 12 attacks. The math was irrefutable. Voss himself flew 16 more missions before the war ended in May. He never saw Lieutenant Kincaid again. Duke was shot down over Berlin in February, killed by ground fire during a strafing run. Voss attended the memorial service. He did not speak. After the war, Voss returned to Indiana. He worked as an aeronautical engineer for Allison Engine Company in Indianapolis. He married. He raised 2 children. He rarely spoke about the war. When asked, he would describe it in technical terms: altitude, airspeed, fuel consumption. He never called himself a hero. He called himself lucky. In 1953, the Air Force published a training manual on defensive fighter tactics. Buried in Chapter 7 was a section titled Energy Management Under Attack. It described a technique where pilots could decelerate during high-speed engagements to force attacker overshoot. The manual did not mention Voss by name. It referenced the tactic as field-developed during European operations, 1944. No attribution, no credit, just physics. Voss did not mind. He had never sought recognition. He had sought survival, and in that he had succeeded. Lieutenant Ellsworth Drummond, the bombardier who witnessed the 12 overshoots, never forgot. He wrote letters to Voss for 30 years, short notes, thanking him, reminding him that his crew made it home that day because one fighter pilot had refused to run. Voss kept the letters in a drawer. He reread them occasionally late at night when the house was quiet. Leland Voss died in 1998 at the age of 78. His obituary mentioned his service in World War II. It mentioned his engineering career. It did not mention the throttle back maneuver. It did not mention the 12 overshoots. Most people who attended his funeral did not know what he had done. But in flight schools, instructors still teach energy management. They still talk about unpredictability as a defensive tool. They still emphasize that survival sometimes requires doing the opposite of what instinct demands. The language has changed. The principle has not. Voss proved that intellect was a weapon, that calculation could outlast aggression, that a pilot mocked for caution could rewrite the rules and save lives in the process. His name fades, but the physics endure. And somewhere in the cold mathematics of aerial combat, the lesson remains. Speed is not always survival. Sometimes, survival is knowing when to slow down.